Conversation, right? Because I can't see the comments.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't see you yet, by the way.
You don't see me. Oh, that's funny. So let me switch to.
Yeah.
We have to turn my camera. No. Oh, you know what? It's. I don't know if it's working because it's using. Um. Because my other thing is using my OBS Studio is using my camera. So that might be why it's not working. But right now.
Oh, okay, got it. Well, just so you know, then.
Okay. So I'm gonna just pop it in now.
And just let me know when you want to go live.
Okay.
I don't see you yet, by the way. I'll start from the outside. It's kind of chilly, but
See me.
let's see. It might be a good intro.
Turn my camera. No. Oh, you know what? It's. I don't know if it's working because it's using. Because my other thing is using my OBS Studio.
Chilly, but all right.
It's not working. But right now.
Oh, okay, got it. Because I look.
Okay.
Dave?
Yeah. All right. It looks good from here. Now.
Can you hear me, Dave?
I can totally hear you.
Okay, good. All right, right on. I'm ready. And just let me know when you want to go live.
Okay.
I don't see you yet, by the way. I'll start from the outside. It's kind of chilly, but
That sounds good to me.
all right, right on.
Well, Joe can hear us, so that's a good sign.
Oh, good. Hi, Joe. Yeah, just let everyone know that I can't hear them,
Oh
so
yeah.
that I don't seem like I'm not responding.
So welcome everyone to the Leap opening. This is definitely an experiment, and let's see. Oh,
Unprecedented territory here.
and that's okay.
We're at the Pohakong of Arboretum,
Yep, we're at MGalleries PNA, and actually, I
and
don't
this is
know.
MGalleries.
I think everyone can hear you. I just don't think you're not going to be able to hear everyone else, which is
Correct.
okay, I think. But we'll just try and be patient with everything.
We'll make do.
I mean, as long as the video is okay. Well, I lost you, and then I didn't, and then you're back. So, oh boy, this is going to be interesting.
Good. Well, welcome to the show, everybody.
All right, perfect. I'm gonna pause this. All right, so welcome to the show, everyone. Just in case you can't hear Frank, although I think everyone can. Um, so this is my solo show at MGalleries PNA, and the curator Frank May. Excuse me, I gotta fix my new hairdo.
Hello.
Is going to be in the gallery itself, showing off the work, and we're going to be doing not only a gallery tour, a gallery opening. We have some questions that we're going to do as part of an artist talk. And I'm really excited. I'm probably going to say this a few times just in case people pop in during the initial or in the middle of the talk. All right, let me try closing this.
Sounds good. So, did you want to jump into your background about your work, your school process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to art school at Mason Gross School of the Arts, and I graduated there in 2005. And then I eventually went on to get my graduate degree in art education, and I've been, I guess, a working artist ever since then. I've been creating work in my studio for a number of years, and I try and let's see, can I do that too, just in case? And I try and use a little bit of a mixture of pop culture and um, fine art to mix inside my work. So this whole series is kind of a more pop art series than I've done in a very long time.
Hmm.
Just gonna say hello to the room.
Yeah, it's a wonderful hybrid. Go ahead.
No, great. Yeah, what were you saying?
Yeah, so it's a nice hybrid of a few different things. You know that you have the pop mindset where everything can be art, but you have this like consistent theme process. Can you talk the title of the show meet and why you decided to use this format?
I really like staying in uh, a form. The word format's actually a good word to use. I really like kind of taking a format and then trying to give myself almost like a false sense of rules, and then having to use my creativity
Yeah.
to stretch those rules and to bend those rules, to break those rules, and to reinvent those rules. Um, and I think when you're an artist, uh, those rules don't really exist in the studio. They might exist in culture, maybe good taste and inflammatory speech are really the only lines that you can or can't cross. But
Hmm.
it's my way of kind of putting my own set of rules together, and then it gives me a chance to try and stretch an idea and kind of take it to its eventual conclusion or eventual like most likely conclusion. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's more successful than others, but I find the constraint can be fun. But this actually came from my solo show at the main gallery, or MGalleries 1. Um, and I had this kind of this character called Ossa Grasse, which just means fat bone in Italian. And I kind of was taking this idea of I thought it was really funny that there'd be a chubby little skeleton because the skeleton really doesn't have any fat on it at all. But
Yep.
but to me, like
There it is. There's open cross.
yeah, and I was like, oh, how can I make this character seem like a real thing? And so I kind of took the what do you call it, the Super Mario 3 logo box. This video game that came out for the
Yeah.
Nintendo Entertainment System when we were kids had Super
Hmm.
Mario in I don't know if he was wearing a raccoon tail or the Tanuki suit, but basically he was wearing one of the power ups on the cover, and he's kind of like jumping because that's really what Mario does. He jumps, and I've always kind of had an affinity for that character because I love the idea that like this dude who's a plumber is sucked into another universe and then is like has to
Hmm.
save it. And also, I kind of relate to being
Hmm.
As an Italian American from the East Coast. I kind of see some of myself in Super Mario. Hello, Eric. Sorry, I'm just saying hello to
It's
everyone.
more. It's a closer. Mhm. Yeah, indeed.
And you
Yeah,
can kind of
these feel like they're video games.
oh
What's
yeah,
that?
you can even see in like the Beast and Batman. Some of these characters really look like Super Mario wearing someone else's costume. Um, and then I was
Hmm.
kind of like, all right, well, I've done so many of these. how can I kind of take the form and change it up? So I started out with doing like Super Mario as Batman, and then Super Squash because I'm really into cryptozoological animals as well. I love the idea of these mythological animals that may or may not exist out in the wild. I guess we can argue about that in the comments if you're really into Bigfoot or whatnot, like I am. But and then I kind of moved on from there. I like The Simpsons a lot, so I was trying to bend The Simpsons work into
Yeah,
my
now I come
own
back to the
form.
grouping here.
Yeah, like to me, um,
Yeah, and I love the
go ahead.
yeah, I love like the knockoff, version of Bart as Bort, and you kind of play with that, yeah, with the off-brand cat one across the hall here. So I'm gonna go across and take a look. I think it's just a lot of fun to play around with the generic brand concept or the knockoff concept.
Yeah, because I feel like stealing is a really important part of fine art and art history. Um,
Yeah,
Artists have been stealing from each other since the beginning of time. But what's funny about it is I can take an idea from somebody, but if I do it in my own way, I'm not taking the original from them. It's not actually stealing. It's more like paying homage or reworking, remixing, and I felt like The Simpsons was a good second or third step in this series because Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, is known to have a huge bootleg Bart collection of his own. He'll buy stuff at shows that people make of like bootleg stuff of his work because he's just tickled pink that people like his work enough to spend time to try and remake it or rework it. Um, I don't think he buys stuff that's like trying to pass itself off as The Simpsons, but like like Black Bart T-shirts from the '80s and '90s. He has a big collection of those, and I remember posting the Homer Simpsons and the Homer Simpson one, and some guy posted on Instagram like, I hope you better not let Matt Groening find out what you're doing because he's going to sue you. I'm like, yeah, that's what some billionaire who lives in Hollywood is going to sue me because I made a watercolor, a badly done watercolor of his character.
well, it's different enough. I think it's not. You're clearly not trying to mimic The Simpsons. I think you're trying to use The Simpsons as a tool, right?
But even still, like, The Simpsons was not his first choice for putting stuff on the Tracy Ullman show.
Right.
He wanted to do the bunny. What is it? I can't remember the
That
name.
rabbit character.
Yeah, and that was his original
Yeah, it's
idea.
like
But
love, something or other.
yeah, and he just didn't want to give up that character to some. He didn't want to give it to HBO or to the production company and worry that they might have partial ownership of it. So he kind of just made up The Simpsons on the spot. I mean, Homer's named after his father.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And so like in some ways it's all kind of like a reaction to, I don't know, it's in some ways like I love The Simpsons because it's a comment on modern American society, and now it's gone on for so long now it's the villain and people are making comments about The Simpsons now, including myself,
Right.
and it seemed really
Yeah.
obvious to jump from one pop culture thing to another, and I find the benefit of pop art is that even if someone doesn't understand contemporary art as a thing, or understand art history, you can kind of hook them in with a familiar character. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
you may know nothing about Gauguin, but you've seen Homer Simpson on a T-shirt. You recognize what this dude is, and in some
Yeah,
ways,
right,
like,
right.
the it might be one of the greatest works of art, at least currently still being worked on. Like
Hmm.
the stuff we think of as being like high art at one time was also pop culture. Like people used to go to
Yeah.
Shakespeare plays and heckle the actors, and they got to pay to be in like the front row to like throw stuff at the performers, and being an actor was like a second rate job. But now we think of these things as high
Yeah.
works of important literature, and I'm not saying
Yeah.
this to diminish Shakespeare or any of the other great works of art that came out of the Renaissance or even ancient works of art, pre-Columbian stuff. I'm just pointing the lens on the idea that like some of the things we think of as garbage today may have way different significance in the future than we think of it now.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
And look, I could be making artwork about all kinds of stuff, but I don't know if it really speaks to anyone else but myself or you know, or anyone outside of the insular art world. But if I put a Rick Sanchez picture on the wall, people start to understand what's going on.
Hmm. Yeah, and well, speaking of art history, so the leap comes from Yves Klein too, right? So you're playing with the photograph, right?
I love that photograph, and Yves Klein, like that was a guy who really understood modern media and understood how all of this stuff could be manipulated. That famous photo, if you're not familiar with it, and I know you are, Frank, because we studied it together. Um,
Yeah.
but to the viewer, that like there's a picture of Yves Klein jumping off this 8 foot wall, and basically onto a paved street and sidewalk, and it's done basically with trick photography. It's all done in the photo studio with actual, not Photoshop, but in a Photoshop using light and developing. Basically, he had a big crash mat there, and he did had 2 photos, and he overdubbed one on top of the other, so it looks like he's diving to his death. Because if you don't know, and as a parent, you become very, very aware of the fact that anything above the height of a person will usually kill them. Like a fall at that height is
Yeah.
potentially deadly. And it takes like a trained athlete to be able to jump from anything above your personal height. So like that's why people will fall down from like standing up and they're totally fine. But that because he got rid of the mat in the photo, there's a real sense of danger, and he's using this kind of
Yeah.
new media, not new medium at the time, but like the medium of photography to really play with this idea of danger. I mean, this is the same guy who copyrighted his own shade of blue, who would then use naked women to paint on giant canvases in his, in his signature color. Um, this guy really understood how media worked. Like him and Duchamp, I feel like they could understand it in their bones. And and really, this leap really directly came from uh, Super Mario. But it wasn't until I was like, oh, I see where I'm going from. Like this is where this is from. I also think of like the Salvador Dali photos of him trying to photograph people jumping to make it look like they're flying. That's not some great work of
Yeah.
art. That was
Yeah.
something that he would experiment with. And also, a lot of this stuff has parallels, um, either to other works of art, other works of literature. Um, I have multiple screens going on right now, so I think you're looking right now at this Superman. Is that the one you're looking at right now?
Yeah. Superman. Yeah.
Yeah, like Superman is based on the Übermensch from Nietzsche in many ways. Like he's the
Hmm.
ideal person, and he was designed by two. Um, I guess they were the children of immigrants, but of Jewish German descent immigrants, and the idea being he was just
Hmm.
like indestructible because of all of the issues that Jews faced while living in Europe. And
Hmm.
I really feel like that Superman was kind of designed in a sense of these nerdy children of immigrants to kind of feel more better a little bit about. Oh, we're not receiving enough. Oh, we're starting to slow down a little bit. I hope that's okay. Let me see if I can switch.
Okay.
Oh no, we're good. I think
Yeah.
we're
Again,
good.
well, I love the. I think that the art term is there's this wonderful postmodern pastiche that you create. So you have this superhero character, Mario. I never thought of Mario as a Superman until I saw this. Strangely, you're like, oh yeah, he is a Superman, and he's like, but just a different world, a different sphere that he's from. And I love that mishmash of that with leap into the void and the just the different aspects of pop culture kind of like thrown together in that pastiche kind of mode, and then repeated over and over again in a very pop way is really it's good stuff.
Yeah, and also like, I mean, if we want to try, I want to try and kind of like a highbrow view of all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, no art is made in a true bubble. Even someone who's working completely in abstraction is being influenced by the nature around them or the objects they have in their home or the colors that were available in their box of paints. We're all influenced by things that are really inconsequential but end up becoming very important later on.
Yeah. Yeah, like an example is like memes. These, although you explicitly take from the meme world, but you're also creating them too. So there's this exchange. I feel like it's like you're memifying things that aren't necessarily that. So I think it's also a really interesting process.
Yeah, there was a time where I was really focused on even painting memes. There was a short time, I think in 2010, where I was literally finding interesting stills from YouTube and painting them with the YouTube bar at the bottom, which is funny because we're broadcasting this on YouTube right now. And then I started making memes for a long time once my oldest daughter was first born, and there is some. I do worry sometimes that I'm becoming like a culture vulture a little bit when I'm trying to paint these memes or doing things that's like internety or memery, even though like I feel like I'm part of the culture in many ways. But like I feel like fine art, there's a certain level of like if I'm gonna spend an hour or two making a painting of the X-Men's Cyclops, it's not going to have the same kind of impact as someone photoshopping Comic Sans on a picture, an embarrassing picture of their cousin. It's not the same thing.
Right.
So I kind of pulled it away a little bit. I am self-aware though, especially when it comes to like choosing things from my own childhood and nostalgia. I'm really drawn to that stuff, not just because it's from my childhood, because there's plenty of characters that I think are out now that I find super fascinating that I never even got to with this series, and I might even continue it on the side. But I also feel like these are things that formed me, and also some of these characters are great works of art in their own right.
Yeah, for sure.
But every once in a while, I'll go on the internet and I started watching videos of artists critiquing other artists, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And there's this whole world of people who make original characters, or they call them OCs, where it's like, it looks like a moody anime character, and they kind of give you like a trading card biography of them. And I sat there going like, I understand this. This makes a lot of sense. I just don't understand why anyone would do this. Like, why invent your own character? If you're not making a comic strip, if you're not making a story with them, what's the point? And I realized, oh no, I had to take a step back. I'm like, oh no, they're doing exactly what I'm doing. It's just they want to do it on their own, under their own terms. I mean, there are some.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this stuff touches the furry community, which is its own separate thing that I don't know enough to really get into. But like, uh, I don't want to lose the plot on this. Hold on a second, my brain stopped for a moment. But like, there's
We're doing that call.
go ahead.
Sorry, I have a friend come in. John just came in the door. Didn't know where this was. This is a social distancing gallery talk. Oh, it's okay. So we're saying, Dave, I'm sorry.
That like, there's this stuff. This stuff kind of takes on its own life, and new rules are created, and I'm just trying to react to that as best I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that. Well, also I wanted to ask about the form of these. That are these intentionally the size? It seem like the size of video game cartridges. Released. Hey, Dave.
Hey, oh my gosh,
You okay?
yeah, totally fine. So, oh, I can see myself dancing. I gotta turn this on for a second. So it turns out that I plugged in the wrong laptop, and this thing didn't tell me that the battery was dying. So all of a sudden, it just turned off.
No. Oh no.
So
Are we live now?
yeah, we're back live. I think I'm still recording. If not, it looks like everything is still going. I'm just gonna type tech. Okay. I can't tell. It's so small I can't see. See, the problem with this laptop is if I want the screen to actually face me, I can't read text on white on this laptop. If that makes any sense. To get the contrast that I like, I have to turn it so that it's staring above my head. It's very. I don't know who designed this camera. It did not do it right. But where was I? Yeah, I think I don't even know where my influences are. I think a lot of it's pop art, and then I even added some of my artist influences in this show. I mean, not Banksy or Mr. Brainwash by any stretch, but Steve Espo Powers is definitely a influence of mine. Pause this.
Mm-hmm. So you can see me okay still?
Yeah, it's vertical, I think, a little bit, but that's all right. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, give me 1 sec.
After all this testing, I'm foiled by not plugging in the right laptop cord.
Right, after planning it and trying it stuff out, yeah. Well, you can't prepare for everything, right?
No, I can't. Well, that's the thing with technology. The most dangerous part is the people. That's where all the flaws rely on, is the actual people themselves. There we go. I gotta bend this down again so I can see me. But yeah, like a lot of my influences are Tom Sachs or
Tom Sachs, yeah.
But it's funny because I don't do a lot of Tom Saxian stuff in my illustration work or my painting work. It's very much so more in my sculptural work.
Yeah, right. Well, it's also you have that methodology or that mindset. I think it's different. It's not so much necessarily the what you're doing. It's like the thought process. I think is what's interesting about Tom.
Yeah, I
feel
it's yeah, I think there's like a real emphasis on using materials for um, the right materials for the right project and kind of the attitude of it all.
Yeah, it's the I love the line, but I think about him a lot, where he says, "Paint first, then cut." I like that. That's like, and that goes for a lot of things. That makes the process way more interesting to me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I also think that like in some ways with like fine art, even with this stuff that I'm doing, even if you want to call it, I wouldn't even call it lowbrow,
Hmm.
because I don't know. I feel like I'm too well educated for this to be lowbrow. I feel like I would just kind of be like trying to pretend to be one of the cool
Hmm.
kids saying this is lowbrow, but like this is like strong middlebrow stuff. I think like I'm really trying
Middle
to.
brow, I like that.
Yeah, I think that's what I am. Like I can talk a great game about highbrow art and lowbrow art. So I think I'm distinctly it just kind of stuck me in the middle brow.
Well, that makes you a good pop artist, right? So that's what pop is supposed to be. It's supposed to be cross any kind of like social status or education level. It's supposed to be do like provide something for everybody.
Absolutely, and like you know I look at like Garfield. That's another one of those inspirations. Like or maybe reverse inspiration. Jim Davis is famous for like kind of just trying to make money off his character. I always thought it was like that's really funny. The idea of like someone like the guy who did Calvin and Hobbes being really precious about the characters and really thoughtful about
Right, right, right.
how he composes them, and then Garfield kind of being like, all right, well, we're going to just see how many different kinds of merch we can come up with. And as I'm sitting there watching a CGI version of Garfield the cat with my children, I'm sitting there going like, this is like the fourth time I've seen Garfield rebooted.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's something really interesting about these are brands or icons. They how they have this weight that comes with them, and you can keep reusing that. And it's yeah, I guess the familiarity of it is what makes it so relatable to people. There's like just the fact you've seen it so many times that you're immediately drawn to that, which is a strange thing when you think about it, right? That why are we drawn to something we're constantly seeing? Uh, so what do you think about that?
Well, I think of like when I remember one time when my wife was giving birth at the hospital, we would go to this Catholic hospital. My wife's not Catholic; she's Jewish, and she's just like, there are crosses everywhere. I'm like, what? She goes, there are crosses everywhere, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess because it's a Catholic hospital, but because I've been around, I was raised Catholic, so the fact that there are crosses in every room I didn't pick up on it. I was just so used to that. Like there were
Yeah,
pictures
yeah,
of
yeah.
Jesus and Mary hanging above my grandmother's couch growing up, and it wasn't until later I was like, oh, that's Jesus. I just thought it was some guy.
It's just like a form that keeps repeating itself. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of like it makes an impact, but it's kind of in like the back of your head, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
And then when you're an outsider or you reframe these things, you're like, oh yeah, that is kind of interesting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah, the Picasso one, I don't I love Picasso's work. I don't paint like Picasso at all, but I always like to tell my wife that I may not be a better painter than Picasso, but I'm a way better father. Because towards the end of his life,
That is
yeah,
for
he would like paint and he'd leave his kids locked outside because he wouldn't hear them because he was so into what he was doing.
sure.
So when I'm feeling low about my work, I'm like, yeah, but Picasso was not a good father and not a good family man, and like,
And neither was Darth Vader, right?
oh yes, that's a bad dad right there too. I'm not gonna say Picasso is as bad as Darth Vader, because in some way Darth Vader is a genocidal maniac. Although in reality, that's all pretend, and a pretend person
Right.
can't kill. You can't really kill other pretend people. Um, but like I don't know, Darth Vader. The older I get, the more I relate to him. Like, oh man, just like you know, you got to try and take it down a notch, Darth.
And also, I found interesting is that I think there's two instances where, yeah, where you reverse the form. It's Picasso and, Friday the 13th.
Oh yeah,
Are the
Jason
two, I
Voorhees.
think, right?
Yeah, so I was doing. I was thinking like, oh, all right. So since Mario jumps from bottom top left to bottom right, I should have all the villains jump the other way. And then when I
Ah,
realized I painted Picasso as a villain and I didn't do Darth Vader as a villain, I was like, maybe this is too deep of a concept. Um, but my idea was I was going to try changing it up. But again, that's the idea of like coming up with a structure and then messing around with the structure and playing with it. I mean, I love the Friday the 13th, the first Friday the 13th movie. I went to summer camp where they filmed that movie.
oh yeah, it's in Blairstown, yeah.
Yeah, and I did the mile swim in that lake. A
Mhm.
lot of those places where they got murdered, I spent nights camping. It's like that's a big part of my childhood. So I was like,
Oh
I
yeah,
got
I lived in Blairstown for a good amount of time. I went to elementary school there, and it was Friday 13th was like the one shining thing in that town. That it was like, and also I think it was like that and Hope, New Jersey and Blairstown both had connections to Friday 13th. So they played that really, that's one of those. It's like going to the Seaside Heights and seeing the Jersey Shore stuff.
there's Jersey
It's
Shore
that
stuff at Seaside Heights.
like it was just, yeah, and just steeped in the Friday 13th lore and living in that town.
Oh my gosh! See, I always thought of Blairstown because when I would go up to Novi Bosco, like I always thought of it as being like this cute little town. Like I never even thought of it as being because I don't even think when I went there until the very last couple of years, I didn't even think I even recognized it as being the Friday the 13th
Right.
because I'd never
The
seen that
setting.
movie. And I was like, and then I was looking at because my wife had the DVD, and I was looking at the DVD going, oh right, the sign for the Camp Crystal Lake was hanging in the trading post at Novi Bosco for decades. I don't know
Oh,
if
right.
I don't know if it was original or what, but I'm like, and it was just like again the crucifix. It was just like this is just so part of the scenery that I didn't notice it, but yet it made it seep its way into my brain.
Yeah, it's like the background murmur, that's like ever present. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so, and I know that talking about villains, I noticed the different, you have, it seemed like to me you had a series of villains and heroes. That's funny you brought that up because it wasn't made explicit. So I had them, I hung them across from each other. So I had the villains over here and then the heroes facing them. So I made the paintbrush a hero because it's a hero to me. So,
Oh, well, that's one of the later ones where you could tell that I'm really trying to mess around with the form. But you could argue that the Cyclops Scott Summers is actually a villain, and
right.
I love Wolverine and Ghost Rider because they're anti-heroes in
Right.
many senses of the word, but which I always gravitated as a kid to, and as an adult, I'd be like, I would not want to hang out with them at all. They'd be like the worst. They would be like clanny and moody all the time and just be ready to fight. I'm like, I'm just too chill for that nowadays.
Love it.
Yeah, I was like, for a while, I was like, oh yeah, I can't do them all the same way. I got to switch it up. Um,
Yeah, and then can you talk about the distinction between using characters and then also like quote unquote real people?
yeah, so like the one on the left here is Jane Goodall. Um, I guess I'd call her field biologist Jane Goodall and environmental activist. And
Mhm.
I recently read a book with with my girls, actually, and my son too. When I'm talking about he was there too. All about the story of Jane Goodall, and I was like, oh, she's a very interesting person. Um, and I thought like, oh, I should highlight. I think I was making these during March or Women's History Month. And I was thinking like, how could I incorporate um, some historical figures into this and kind of play
Yeah.
around with the idea of heroes and important and highlighting important people, like because I'm highlighting these characters that are important to me, but like really Billie Jean King, the tennis player, did more important work by trying to lay the groundwork for female athletes than Wolverine did. He's not even a real character. And the more you learn about Billie Jean King, like, even though you might say, well, she isn't as well remembered nowadays, and you have like Venus and Serena Williams nowadays
Right.
who are really tearing it up, and women. But the only reason I think women's tennis gets paid the same amount as men's tennis players, like their actual salaries are comparable, where in
Yeah.
every other industry, especially in the sports, it's not the same because of
Hmm.
Billie Jean King's activism and her proving that like, no, I can beat a man. This has nothing to do with me being a woman. Um,
Right. Right.
and I find that like as a man who teaches, like I'm in a quote unquote traditional woman's field. I really appreciate her kind of like putting herself out there to really change the world for better and like make actual change. I mean, the fact that we're in
Yeah.
2020 and women get paid like 70 to 75% of what men get paid for the same or comparable jobs is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. It's very interesting how tennis is the outlier in that. And I appreciate that. I played tennis in high school, and I very much love tennis. My whole family loves tennis, and I remember hearing about Billie Jean King. And it's funny, like I don't remember even the guy that she beat. It's like there was that match between the where she faced another professional tennis player. And do you remember the guy that she played
If you
by
asked me a month
chance?
ago, I probably would have remembered. I can't now.
Yeah. So that's funny. Like there's case in point. Like we only remember her. And that's really profound. In that match because she won, right, and B, she's an amazing player, and so there's that means a lot.
Well, it's like the thought of that, like women in the United States have only had the vote for like 100 years.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm. Yeah.
the idea that like there's all this. I mean, a lot of it comes from the logic that like, well, men had to support families, so they should be paid more. But we see it more and more where women are having to support their own children, and or families are taking on different shapes and sizes, and that it's like this argument holds no water, but yet
You're
we're
right.
still okay with it. It's just kind of funny to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't know if is Wangari Maathai in this show too. I don't know if I finished that one.
The what again?
The Wangari Maathai. She's dressed as an I might have given that one to my daughter.
That's
She
good.
she
Well, I'll pan over to the quote unquote real side. I have obviously like Stalin and Mao together because they need to be.
they're only
But you
semi
have
real.
so you got
Oh yeah, here, right here. Wangari Maathai was
yeah.
she was a oh my gosh, I should know this. I want to say I'm going to say Nigerian. I can't remember now. She was an environmental activist and an activist for women's education, and she ended up planting thousands of trees in Africa and changing the climate of her country with efforts. And it's funny because like she lived in a time where it was like women weren't accompanied by men could be like beaten by the police, and she managed to
Mhm.
like move to the U.S., get educated, and then move back to try and change her country for the better. I have a real affinity for Wangari Maathai because when my oldest daughter did what they call a wax museum project at her school, and
Uh-huh.
she went as Wangari Maathai. And if you've met my daughter, she's a young white girl with brown hair, so she wore like a she made a headband that looked like this. No, she wore a bandana that she tied in the front, and she wore a dress that matched the pattern, and she carried around a little tree in a pot that I made her. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
that's it. That's what you're doing. You're just going to imitate her dress, and then you're going to tell everyone all about this important female activist. And I was just like,
Well, wonderful.
yeah, I was like, oh, that was a very proud parenting moment for me.
Yeah.
Which I always found was funny because like you went to the school and there was like a whole room of Abraham Lincolns. You know,
Wow. Well, I guess it's easy. That's an easy icon to use, right? Talking about icons, that with Abraham Lincoln, you have a beard and a hat, and that's basically you got it.
and he's not a
So,
bad guy. It's not like you find out all this stuff later that oh Lincoln did all this terrible stuff too. Like he basically fought to emancipate people from slavery. I mean, and died for it. You can't really fault the guy for that.
mhm. No, not at all. I think that's he more or less, has done good things, right?
Yeah, I think we can all agree Abraham Lincoln seemed like a pretty decent guy. I'm gonna put myself out there.
Yeah, right. We're not going to really go out. You're not going out on a limb by saying that.
Oh, and I
Uh,
and I recognize him treating Native Americans totally unfairly, but also like
right.
he didn't survive his presidency, so I'll just say he paid the price.
Right. That's for sure. Yeah, and you have Espo
Oh yeah,
next to.
Steve Espo Powers, one of the beautiful losers, was what
Mhm.
the group was called, with like Barry McGee and Margaret Kilgallen,
Yeah.
and which is funny because he was
Yeah.
not really.
Rest in peace, right? So.
Yeah, he I- it's funny because like I'm not a graffiti guy. Like I've put up a couple things, but not with spray paint, just like glue ups here and there, and most of the stuff I ever put up fell down. So whatever. Um, and I might put a few stickers up there before, but Steve Powers is like a reformed graffiti writer who then became a street artist, and he recently did. I guess it's not that recent, but a year or so ago, he did a mural in my town, and I got to meet him, and I was just like, wow, he's like exactly what I would expect. Like he was nicer than I expected. He was like very forthcoming with talking to me. He was willing to talk. He and his assistant were real nice guys. He actually bought pizza for me and another guy. He's like, "Oh, I went to go get lunch. You guys want a slice of pizza?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" Very lovely person. Um, I would usually say don't meet your heroes, but Steve Powers is fine. You can talk to him. He's a good conversationalist. Very interesting person. And also, he's been a big influence on my work because he uses a lot of clear and lines, and he uses a lot of he draws a lot of his inspiration quite literally from if he's doing a work a mural in a town, he'll take inspiration from the block or so area around the town. He did a lot of work that kind of was inspired by the idea of commuting because Metuchen is like a real commuter town, and we have a train station and stuff. Um, and has been some controversy around his work too, which I find um, utterly hilarious because I find his work, for the most part, really uh, it's not controversial. It's uncontroversial, but whatever. But there's people can always find something to complain about, and I'm not even saying that they're wrong. I think sometimes that people are right to complain about stuff, but it's funny that even he gets complaints too.
Yeah, indeed.
Let's see who else is up there. But yeah, I had a lot of fun painting that. That's a picture of him jumping outside his studio.
Well, I think it's a good time to talk about like I mean we're kind of touching on it, but what is your like current worldview about the arts? How do you feel about the arts is developing, and especially now, like given this new kind of paradigm we're living in.
Well, I mean, it's weird because in some ways I would deem the arts as non-essential. Like here we go. Here's a meme painting right there. There's Big Chungus,
The fungus.
Yeah, well, but it literally is a meme made from a short clip from an old Looney Tunes cartoon where Bugs Bunny's making fun of Elmer Fudd, and then people turned him into its own separate character. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, Big Chungus, like that's hilarious. Or just regular
Yeah, and
fat.
this is like a fairly new. This is a new meme, right? So it's not been around for long.
Probably about a year at most.
Yep.
Even though the clip is easily from like the 40s or 50s, like which I find really funny. Um, but like I don't know. In some ways the arts are non-essential, right? I'm not keeping anyone alive with my paintings, but in many other ways, this is the kind of thing that people need right now to kind of stay focused and realize why we're social distancing and why we're trying to um, keep ourselves sane, which is exactly what my art does. It helps me keep sane. Um,
Yeah.
like,
Well, whenever I hear that argument about like the what's essential or non-essential about, for example, like the arts, think about this Churchill quote about they asked him like, why are you trying to save these artworks in the middle of war, and he said something to the effect of like, well, what are we fighting for? So I think that that's a really profound comment. He's like, we're fighting to save these things because they're important to him. So these does that make sense to you?
absolutely, and I think like this is the stuff that makes life worth living. Um, I'm not saying my paintings, but I mean art in general.
Well, more or less.
Like you probably you don't need a Loch Ness monster. I'm sorry, Loch Ness monster, a creature from the Black Lagoon painting on your wall to really feel fulfilled. But if you want to, they're available for sale. Like
True.
they will improve your life at least a little bit. Um,
That's right.
but like, but but if you don't have art, then you know whether it's movies or music or visual art or games, like all this stuff is the things we use to occupy our brains that take us out of our everyday existence and struggle. Whenever you see culture start to, get comfortable, that's when people start really producing art. But also when people
Yeah.
feel under duress, they'll make, protest art.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and also, how do we know about any culture beyond our own? It's through their artwork. We can't talk to them directly, right?
oh yeah,
So that's the other what makes it very. I find it problematic to say like some things like that's not essential. It says, but how would you know about anything at all? so so without the culture's artwork, how do we know anything about any piece of history, right?
exactly. Um, and if nothing else, even if it doesn't tell you about their culture per se, it does say something about what they found important. Because usually
Mm-hmm,
cultures make artwork about the things they find that are important. Um, that's how we live in a culture that finds reality TV important. That's how we end up voting in a president who is basically a game show host.
yeah, right, more or less, yeah.
Um, and some of these characters are the kinds of characters that I feel like are the things that are gonna um, are really kind of stand the test of time. Like Oscar the Grouch is a really interesting character. He's essentially a homeless person who lives on the
Right.
street, but he's not like he's really sour. He's not always positive. He's kind of grouchy, but he's an important part of the neighborhood. Like he is an
Mm-hmm.
important character to the fabric of Sesame Street, and without him, it wouldn't really feel like New York, although it feels more gentrified nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's essentially what he is. He's essentially like a homeless character that is basically made to be kind of safe. He doesn't have any real mental issues. He's not fighting addiction. He's just like he lives outside. He is who he is. You don't want to try and change him, but you don't exclude him from things.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like he's kind of like the Diogenes, of Sesame Street.
Yeah. So we in my house we've been watching a lot of Shalom Sesame, which is it's a mix between the American Sesame Street and the Israeli Sesame Street. I don't remember what the Israeli Sesame Street is. It's something Tsum Tsum, which is basically sesame seed and Rehoboth Tsum Tsum. I don't know. I can't remember what it is, but it basically means Street of the Sesame.
Uh-huh.
And the Oscar the Grouch character there is called Moshe Ufnik, and
Uh-huh.
basically he's like a burgundy grouch who lives in a recycling bin, who I find hilarious because he's got this really
Huh.
thick Israeli accent. Um,
Recycling bin.
and he's like, oh, he's like Oscar the Grouch, but he just sounds like more like an old man than Oscar the Grouch does to me because he's got that really heavy Israeli accent, which I find really funny. And it wasn't until I discovered Moshe Ufnik, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess Oscar the Grouch is an important character. There's no Cookie Monster version that I can think of, and they don't have a big bird. They have a giant hedgehog.
Huh. Why
Um,
do you think that is?
um, I don't know. I'm not really totally sure. He's got an adorable
Why would
voice
they,
though, an adorable
right, why would they
voice.
take away a character? What's the purpose of that?
I think he's kind of like a childlike character who's big and fun to watch. Like I haven't watched a lot of the original Israeli Sesame Street, but because the Sholem Sesame is actually it's a mix of American characters and Israeli characters, and it's literally designed to teach kids about the Jewish high holy days and the Jewish holidays.
Uh-huh. Oh, I see. I gotcha. It's an educational tool.
Oh yeah, totally. Um,
Yeah, well, what I love about the Cookie Monster one is that it's like the cookies have become the architecture. They have like the manhole, looks like manhole cover, and the fence are also made out of cookies. So it's like you're seeing through the eyes of the Cookie Monster. Like this is how he sees the world, right?
yeah, I was really
So
thinking
it's
about like, oh, I was gonna do because Big Bird, you can see the back. It kind of looks like Sesame Street. It's inspired
yeah,
by the architecture of the show. I was like, oh, Cookie Monster's got a weird view of things. I really should make it like almost cookie like.
and all right.
Because like I think to me some of the most important parts of like the most artistic parts of like the Super Mario games are the backdrops, the level
Mhm.
design is really important. Like the character design actually I feel like is a lot less important than the level design is. That's why a lot of my illustrations like here of Mr. Brainwash has like the clouds in the
Yeah,
background. It's kind of that Mario esque. Um,
yeah, yeah. And they control V.
oh yeah, because he's just copying and he's not even. I'm sorry, he's not copying and pasting. He's paying some graduate student to copy and paste for him. Let me take my half cooked idea and you cook it up and make it look good, and then I'll sell it for hundreds of dollars in a limited series.
Yeah, the Goon series. First like literally the Lagoon Goon, and then the Goons 1 through 3 or 4. You're in there's Banksy, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I put is Steve Powers one of the art goons. Is that?
I don't. Yeah, I don't think. I don't think that was part of it.
Oh no, it's yeah. Banksy's definitely because I was like, oh, I'll do Mr. Brainwash because he's got those mutton chops, and I was like, oh, that'll be definitely, um, that'll definitely uh, translate well into illustration. Though for a while I was really trying to buy one of those Banksy masks, and they're not cheap. Like I found one for like
Yeah,
hundreds of dollars.
yeah. And I just recently saw this post by Banksy about him just like doing work in his bathroom, and it says like his wife hates it when he's stuck home, and it's just like rats like everywhere all over his bathroom, like, messing around with stuff. I was like, that's really brilliant. So even in this, like he's still working inside. He still can do that.
Yeah, I find him to be a fascinating character. Like I don't know if I even think of him as being a great artist as much as I think he's like or a great graffiti artist or painter as much as he's a really good conceptual artist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I feel like the concepts and the ideas are way more interesting than the actual work itself.
Yeah, and I agree with that certainly. I think that as he uses graffiti as a tool for his conceptual work, it's like it's a thing that and that's what makes it so distinct. That 99% of graffiti is a very specific kind of thing. And when you look at a Banksy, you're not, it seems like distinct. There's something else. It may not be like a part of the graffiti language, but it's something else.
Yeah, well, shout out to our friend Joe Castronova.
Yeah, yeah, there we go.
And
He does something like that. Yeah,
yeah,
he like takes graffiti and makes it something else.
yeah. Well, I'll just say for Joe's sake, I'll give my theory that for a long time I thought that Banksy was Bleck the Rat, who is a graffiti artist from France, who
Oh,
who does similar stencil rats all over Paris, I believe. So for a long
uh-huh.
time, everyone's like, "Oh, I bet it's the same guy," although I'm pretty sure Banksy's actually a British national. Oh, look, Shrouded Hand, one of my favorite YouTubers, is now also in the feed as well.
Oh, right on.
So yeah, I think like for me, um, I don't know. Part of me is like always dreams about like being an artist full time. Even though I think at this point in my life, I realize now that that would probably be a very bad idea because I think I would just be like bored.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, but part of me wants to really I kind of play with this idea in the mind. I'm really interested in like how artists kind of start their career and how they do the work they do, like how they like get to where they are.
Yeah.
Speaking of artists, why don't you go? I can put my mouse in the video feed. I didn't even realize. Go back. I want to look at the Pablo Escobar one. If you can go back to that one,
Sure.
because once I did Pablo Picasso, I was like, oh, I should do Pablo Escobar as well.
The Pablo.
Yeah. I mean that guy's a nightmare clearly. Um, but no, I don't want you on camera. Sorry, Rose.
I don't care.
Okay. If you don't know who Pablo Escobar was, he was basically a multinational drug dealer. And there's little rhinos, or no, hippos in the picture because you can barely see them. There, because one of the side effects of his great wealth in Medellin is he had his own little private zoo. And eventually, what happened was when he died and they kind of closed down all of his stuff. Um, the side effect was they have like these now feral hippos in Colombia that are left over from like one of his personal zoos. So even now to this day, one of the most dangerous animals in the world is just running around the mountains of Colombia because some guy decided he wanted to get a bunch for to show off to his kids.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're very dangerous, and like they're so, but they don't seem like this, especially in this drawing. It seems like a silly creature, right? But they're definitely very very vicious.
Oh yeah, they kill more people than like bears do because they don't
Yeah.
see well and they're very territorial and they're enormous. But though,
Yeah.
if you get a chance, anyone watching this, you should go check out Zay Frank's Opie videos, the reverse hippo,
Mhm.
where it's basically just he pretends that hippos walking in reverse are different animals called opies, and it's like the funniest thing I've seen in a really long time.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin the part where they watch the opie eat, but it's pretty disgusting and hilarious.
I love it. Yeah, and also like I've noticed that there's like, can you talk about? So you have like you have a couple of versions of certain ones. Like you have a couple of Maos, you got a couple of Vaders. So what's the process of like making one or multiples? Like, how do you deal with that? Seems like it's mainly singular, but
Well,
it seems like you got a few more.
one of my inspirations right now is this artist called the Sucklord, who is a toy maker who lives in Chinatown in New York City, and he makes action figures, and he does it by taking parts of old action figures and old toys and remixing them to make brand new characters. And he
Uh-huh.
designs not only the figures, but he also designs the backing boards. And I think that's where I kind of got the idea of like using Star Wars, like the iconography of Star Wars in my artwork, because that's something that he does. He's really famous for,
Uh-huh.
and his work is really inspirational. I mean, his work can get a lot more risque than my work does, by a long shot. Um, but his action figure work, it's very rare that you can buy artwork from a living artist who I know is going to be one of those people who really kind of transcends the like his genre of like bootleg art toys. And I was doing resin figures for a while, and I might get back to
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah.
later on. Um, but um, so I was trying to use some of my heroes' inspirations in my own work. So Mao Zedong was something that Andy Warhol used a lot in his work because of the use of iconography in the communist. I got what would we call it, the Cultural Revolution. Um, I mean, look, Mao Zedong was a maniacal megalomaniac who probably set China back for decades. And now I feel like China's really only starting to recover.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it still has a lot of problems because of his legacy. But you look at him; he's just like this, like he looks like a old cat. I don't know. I just find him very interesting character,
Right.
and like whether or not you see yourself as someone who's like socialist or sympathetic to socialism, or a capitalist or whatever, like he's still a very interesting character, which is also why I I did Stalin, because
Mhm.
Stalin is another one of
Yeah.
those leaders who really mastered iconography
Mhm.
and propaganda in his lifetime.
And it's funny, you didn't have to change much in the Mario because of just how he already looks.
Yeah, I just saw my dad in the chat, and he'll attest that his older brother looks a lot like Super Mario and a little bit like Stalin. But
Yeah.
like, I
But
mean,
yeah, I just read something about his daughter, who came to the United States and was not a supporter of her father, and just she passed away like not that long ago. I forget where, but it was really interesting. There's like this channel on YouTube. It's like called the History Guy, where she went into depth about her life and living in the United States and being, Stalin's daughter. She took, obviously she wasn't, her name wasn't Stalin. She kind of like gave that up, but it's really interesting stuff.
yeah, I mean, this painting I really tried to make it like the Russian propaganda at the time. The Because there's a huge collection where we went to school at the Zimmerman
Yeah,
Museum,
realism.
of the Russian nonconformist stuff.
Right.
And some of that artwork is some of my main inspirations even to this day. I
Yeah,
really love that stuff.
really. Yeah, the Zimmerly. Shout out to the Zimmerly, right? It's really there's some. It's a really great collection of at the Dodge Foundation, right? That
Oh,
was brilliant.
yeah, it's amazing, and I try and go there a few times a year. I really love that museum. I probably go there more than I go to the Met. Like it's so good.
Yeah. Oh no, it's right here, right in New Brunswick. So really good stuff.
But like, yeah, like
Yeah, and this would fit right into that exhibit. This the Super Stalin. I feel.
oh yeah, totally. Like, I mean, I wonder if they. I know Tetris came out of Russia. I wonder if Super Mario made its way in.
Oh, yeah. That's right. It's a good question.
Yeah, like I don't know. I've always found the iconography of like villains kind of interesting. Like you see a lot of
Hmm.
people who are really into like, people who dress up like stormtroopers and like dress up like Darth Vader or the Joker and Harley Quinn. Like these were not written to be like laudable characters. They're
Hmm.
meant to be the bad guys, but people are still drawn to them. Um, I think some characters are stronger than the others. I'm definitely stop. I need you to stop. Thank you. Sorry, I had to parent for a little bit.
Children,
Aren't they really our greatest artwork? Yeah. Can't believe
yeah,
I
you got to
said that.
be a space cat sometimes.
Yeah. Again, the older I get, the more I relate to Darth Vader. But like I really like but Stalin really understood iconography. He would Photoshop people out of photos and make them disappear. Almost like to make them like never have they existed, like erase their history if they either crossed him or disappointed him or whatever. Like I think he did that with Trotsky too. Like it just
Oh yeah, very sinister. Oh yeah, I remember seeing a series of photographs as he was getting rid of people. Like it started very large, and then the crowd was large at first and very small at the end of the editing
yeah.
with him.
Ugh, that idea is just really frightening to me, which is why I think his iconography always kind of stuck with me as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's I make a point of if I bring someone to the Dodge Foundation, is that you see like if you see this work that's up, that means that these artists like literally risk their lives to make these things because he would have no qualms about killing these people for making this degenerate artwork, right?
Oh yeah,
So,
and the scariest part is that one of the best displays is the artist notebook that kind of
mhm.
that basically this guy was I don't remember the name of the artist, which is sad. I should know that, but like they were basically put into an artist gulag, and they were then taken to basically create the propaganda, and it just talks about the conditions and like the hierarchy and the abuse between and to prisoners under the communist rule, and it's just like frightening that just because
Yeah,
um, you don't agree with someone's politics, that you're able to just treat them like not like people. It's just really scary.
yeah. Well, it also showed again, like how it's interesting how he viewed art as this. He thought it was very important and powerful. So it was so powerful that he would kill people because they weren't making the right kind of art. So that says a lot about what art can do for a culture and how the importance and like the severity. The even Stalin. I mean, all the leaders during that period were trying to save like their culture and Western culture, and largely it was artwork, and that's was a motivator.
Yeah, in a lot of ways they're even like something like the Amber Room. There was a room that was supposedly made of all of amber that was lost. It was created by the czars, and no one really even knows where it is now. It was literally disassembled and packed away and then stolen. There's
Wow.
and some people think that it's possible that the room being made of all amber had some other kind of like some kind of electrical phenomenon created with it, like that it was
Huh.
somehow some kind of weapon.
Oh, whoa.
So I also think a lot of these leaders, especially like Hitler, was really into the occult. Um,
Yeah. That's
like
very cool.
I think to them, like it wasn't just the power of the message, but also these objects might have had their own power as well that they were trying to harness.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I feel like with Stalin and with Mao, that power was not an abstract idea. It was definitely very literal.
Yep, yep. You get the red eyes.
Yeah, I don't know what. I'm assuming he had black eyes, but I gave him red eyes because of communism.
That's right. Well, I mean, are there, since I can't see the stream, are there any questions or any comments made yet at from the viewership?
No, but there are some great. Oh, there are comments definitely. Shrouded Hand says my art is cool. That's great. Thank you to my favorite YouTubers for stroking my ego. My father says he loves hippos, but I know for a fact he does not like communism. Let's see who else. Christopher Brown says that he loves cults. So do I.
Um,
I'm really.
I know he does. He's a fan.
Yeah, I'm really into learning about cults. There's nothing more interesting to me than hearing the downfall of someone because of their own hubris.
Yeah. Oh,
And there's like no greater story than someone who's like born into one of these situations and finds their way out. I find those stories so inspiring.
mm-hmm.
Oh, is my cup a hippo? No, my cup is a frog. This is my frog cup.
I can't see your picture, so.
Oh no, I'm showing it to the stream.
Very good. Excellent.
My work reminds Shrouded Hand of David Shrigley. Oh yes, I am really familiar with his work. I love the humor in it.
Wait, so who is it again?
David Shrigley.
Oh, yeah, I'm not familiar. What's he like?
He does a lot of like text-based artwork and very simple, cartoony stuff that is very, very bitingly funny. He's a British painter. I think I'm saying this name right. He was one of my favorite interviews on the Bad at Sports podcast years ago. I think it was
Okay.
he is so smart. I'll send you some links of stuff. I kind of think of him as like, he's not as technically good as like technically his work isn't as technically attractive as Banksy's, but it's like way funnier to me. And
Love that.
Christopher asks, "There's no Tiger King pieces."
I have not. You know what? I admittedly I have not seen Tiger King. Have you?
Okay, so no, I have not seen the Netflix series. I am listening to the Joe Exotic podcast that was done by this Wondery, I think. And it's all about Joe Exotic and the Tiger King. But there's a really good YouTube video by Primink. It was from like a year or two ago, all about the Tiger King's YouTube channel. And in the immortal words of Don King, only in America. Only in America. Could a guy...
Yeah, I know very little about the series, and I just you can't avoid it now. Like there's all these like memes and things pop up, and like you get bits and pieces of it. But yeah, I have not seen the actual show yet. But I probably need to be a good pop culture person. So I will dig in at some point.
Yeah, it's not like a heady documentary series or anything like that. And I think it's probably not for the faint of heart because there is some like animal abuse in it because
okay.
Most of the people in this documentary are terrible.
Yeah.
With the exception of one character. This is an actual person named Saf who loses his arm to a tiger and then goes back to work. And I say his because I think throughout Saf is a transgender man who identifies as a man and is misgendered like the entire documentary, from what I'm told. Also, probably the only character with like more than one or two redeeming qualities. At least of all the characters that I came across in the in the later in the in the I don't know what you're talking about, Rose. Sorry. Oh, she's playing Pokemon Go while I'm sitting here. Hope you're not affecting my my stream here. No, we're good. Excellent connection.
What is the do you know what like the I don't even know what it is really. What is the overview of that show? Like what is Tiger King?
Oh, it's like it's a story of a bunch of people who own private zoos in Oklahoma and Florida.
Okay, I see.
And basically how crazy it is, and how and how crazy the character. It's really character based. You really need to watch it for the characters in the story. I don't want to ruin anything for anyone who plans on watching it.
Oh, it's one of the yeah. Since it was brought up, I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. I personally feel like exotic animal people are always a little bit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And because I feel like there's a certain. I think animals make people a little bit nuts. Like they, like, and I'm saying this as a cat owner. Like I treat my cat like a roommate. Like he is basically a tiny creature I let live in my house, and I let him scratch me, and then I feed him. Like that's nuts. But any negative, any positive thing you can say about pet owners, because they do have a lot of empathy, which I think is good. But I think like exotic pet owners, a lot of that empathy is lost, and I think sometimes they're more like animal hoarders than they are like animal companions.
Yeah, right.
So, but like one fact you learn on the show that I just learned through the podcast, that there are more tigers in Texas than there are out in the wild. Right, because people are breeding these tigers to pet in like petting zoos as babies, and then they're putting these weird roadside zoos that they really don't belong in.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Like I think of all the people I know who have dogs, and like how much care goes into taking care of this small animal who has been bred to be around people and is naturally inclined to being around people. Now, triple or quadruple the size of that animal and make it wild and very dangerous and not suited to being around large groups of people. And a lot of the people aren't stable who own them.
Yeah. And this is actually I know that this is a meme, but what is the Joe Boomer meme with Snoopy? Like what's the connection? Or what's that about?
I really like Peanuts. I really like the Peanut comics. And Snoopy, particularly, I think kind of transcends. Like the Peanuts comics themselves are all about Charles Schultz's view of himself and relationships, but Snoopy kind of spun out to be his own kind of separate character. And one of the characters Snoopy also is Joe Cool, where he'd wear a sweater. It says Joe Cool, and he wears these sunglasses. And I was like, oh, but it's funny because like Joe Cool is really a character who is probably older than my father, really, because it was written by someone my grandfather's generation. Really, Charles Schultz would have been 100 probably at this point. So I wrote Joe Boomer on it because I was like, because there's all this talk about like the word boomer possibly being like a slur. I'm like, it's really, people got to relax about this stuff.
Yeah, right.
And I'm saying this as a millennial because it turns out I'm ruining everything somehow. But it was kind of an idea, especially because I have a follower on Instagram who is probably a little older than my parents, and she posts a lot of Snoopy stuff. I was like, oh yeah, I guess like Snoopy's like a real. It's kind of old even for us. I think I had a lot of Snoopy stuff as a kid, but it was really like a throwback kind of thing. It was really designed for people my parents' age, the baby boomers.
That's right. Oh, that makes sense now.
As my father says, It sounds like you had a wonderful childhood. Yes, I did have a wonderful childhood.
Oh, that's terrific.
But this is one of the Super Squash is one of the first in
I love it.
I have a real interest in cryptozoological animals, um, cryptozoology is the study um, of animals that have not been. Oh, I thought I lost Frank for a second. That may or may not exist. Oh, I did lose Frank, but I'm still gonna go. I'm still gonna talk because I think my stream, the quality, yeah, my stream is still good. Cryptozoology is the study of animals that may or may not exist. Oh, you're back. Good. Um,
Okay, so yeah, did I lose you?
yeah, just for like a couple seconds, but you're back, and we never lost the stream. So
Oh, okay,
good.
good.
So Super Squash was the first one in this series, I think, because I've been trying to work on a whole series of like cryptozoological animals, animals that may or may not exist, or animals that are hidden. Basically, is where the word comes from, like Sasquatch and the Jersey Devil, and like, but cryptozoology is not a real science because the people who study cryptozoology are often people who faith-based believe in that these animals exist, and don't actually take a scientific approach. However, there are animals like the panda was technically a cryptozoological animal, or the even like the Komodo dragon were cryptozoological animals because for a long time scientists didn't believe that they actually existed until they finally discovered them.
Ah.
And it wouldn't matter that local people were like, yeah, these animals live in the. They're like, oh no, you're making this up. This is like a tall tale. Um, but so I don't believe that Sasquatch or Bigfoot exists. I want him to exist, but I don't really think he does. I think it's more likely that like it's probably some kind of other animal that has some kind of genetic issue or physical malformality that lives out in the woods. But like there's a whole lore, and that could be its own series dealing with Sasquatch. Part of this is also I started my own club on Instagram called the Cryptozoological Drawing Club.
Oh yes, right.
The Cryptid Drawing Club, and I haven't really been keeping up with it. I might get back to it now, but it's a little hard because I feel like work is taking up so much time. But I was originally going to do like a Jersey Devil one and a Sasquatch one, which is where I got the inspiration for the Tilly one. I was like, I didn't make a Jersey Devil one. I might as well make a Eustace Tilly, who is the unofficial, probably semi-official logo of Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this is the Asbury Park Tilly because he's got the hair that kind of curls out into those little horns, and the Coney Island Tilly, his hair curls down and in. Although it's rumored they're based off the same person who's supposed to be Eustace Tilly, but who is like I guess an owner of the parks or someone who invested in the parks at one time. But the Asbury Park Tilly, I find it's way more stylized and a little bit more fun than the Coney Island Tilly, who kind of looks more like Harry Houdini to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, actually, I wanted to go into, since you work in a lot of different media, can you talk about like your process, like your studio process, working in different types of media and how they overlap and how they're different? Go into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been. We talked a little bit about Tom Sachs at the beginning, and his real inspiration to me was the use of different materials, particularly what he calls bricolage, which is just using different materials to make new things. And I would think of myself really more as a collage artist than anything else. So these are mostly done in watercolor, color pencil, and gouache, which is just kind of like a tempera paint, which is a little bit nicer and more opaque version of watercolor, usually used for illustration. And it's more immediate, but I find it's way more fun than painting with a lot of other materials for me.
Right. Well, this came from that wood cutout, right? Like this whole lead concept kind of originated from the Osa Grassa woodcut, right?
Yeah, they all came. They came from the action figure, which is where I kind of got the ideas from the Sucklord, who was my main inspiration making my own character. I 3D printed my own chubby skeleton, and then I built a whole kind of brief lore around him, and then I made a flying character shirt. Character. Oh, I can't. Words aren't working. It's like a character based for my solo show at the main gallery years ago, which is basically just like a Super Mario with a skull head. And I used the same kind of stance for all these characters, the Osagrase, the Fat Bone character,
Mm-hmm.
and I've really grown to like the stance because like it's hard to come up with a position that is really original. I mean, I don't think you can even copyright a posture. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but not that people won't try. Um, but
Right.
like I think there was this artist Mike Martin who does like a lot of illustration for comic book stuff, and he did a whole series of like side profiles of different characters like from Marvel comics and DC comics and movies. And I was like, oh, it's great. He's using the same form and then applying it to all these different characters, and he paints things very photorealistic. He also did one of Superman. It's like the old 20s or 30s Superman with his hands on his hips, kind of standing there. And then he then dressed Superman in all these different characters. My favorite one is it's still Superman, clearly dressed as Wonder Woman with the crown on in the Superman stance. It's so
Yes.
awkward looking because he's still built like Superman, wearing the crop top and shorts.
That's great.
And I was like, oh, this is great. You're taking the same form and you're kind of messing around with it, and taking the same shape and reworking it. This one is just like the Super Mario, but this is just more straight up Superman than the Super Mario one I did, which is just Super Mario, just a Superman. But
Mm-hmm.
I think this one's gouache. Maybe some acrylic paint pen, but these are mostly done in watercolor and
Mm-hmm.
and colored pencil. Um, I mean, not only is it the stuff I have most on hand, but it goes on paper so easily. It's so easy to get your ideas out from your brain to your hands to the paper. Like I love working with wood, but like there's a process to it. You have to sand things down. You have to spray it sometimes, or you have to paint it with a brush and then cut it. Um, and the way I work is I often will kind of sit down and I'll pump out 4 or 5 projects at once. So some of these I didn't even finish the original drawing until uh, I didn't even start painting them until I finished the initial drawing. Or some of these were drawn like the pencils for all of these were drawn at the same time. Some of these like 4 or 5 were done at a time, and then some of them are like, oh, actually, I have to pull this back out. I'm going to redo part of this, which is why you have multiples of the same character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see the decision making, which I really enjoy, especially guard making. Like I love seeing decisions being made, and seeing like multiples of one type, shows that there's that happening. So that's it's a fun process to explore.
Yeah, and I really wanted to make these small to make them affordable as well,
Yeah.
because you spend a lot on with art. You always spend a lot on displaying and framing things, but if you make it small, it's much easier to find. If you can make your stuff in a standard size, it's really easy and cheap to find framing and easy to ship. Like you don't have that issue that you have with like a wood piece, like I normally my larger pieces. Um, but but part of me also really loves seeing like working in large. Um, I like working large, but there's something
Yeah.
freeing about knowing that like this is only going to take me a few hours each one, and being able to walk away from it and come back without having to the process of getting ready to paint these is much simpler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed.
But I actually started recently, as this series ended, started doing ones that are slightly bigger. But I have made a few 5x7s again.
Yeah, and well, this is also it shows how something like this crisis will make a form of a show. You know that you had to send it via mail to the gallery, and there's this pragmatism that's really interesting. You're sort of like it's like what we were talking about earlier with limitations. Like it's funny. I think the show makes it more interesting that you had to this had to be sent. Because of this crisis, like the crisis is somehow forming the show.
Yeah, we
Right.
even talked about Bojana's. How do you say her first name? The other artist at the main gallery.
Oh, Boyana?
Boyana. Okay, it is Boyana. Um, and she wanted to do installation, but she really couldn't because of the restrictions on.
Right. Yeah, she had this whole different show plan, and because of the nature of it, it would be almost completely lost. That all this effort to install something really elaborate. And it's funny because that was kind of the first, really fully installation. I've had installations done, of course, but it was the first, and of course, it happened at this time, literally the worst time. So in 4 years, this is the worst possible show to have this kind of crisis in. So we decided to do another series that she has been working on as a placeholder, and then next year, April 2021, we're going to have her show at MGalleries, the first gallery. So
yeah, and she had to scrap this elaborate installation idea because it wasn't possible to even have anyone in the gallery to view it.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right.
And
It would be
someone
a
could touch
waste.
something and then transmit something to someone else. I mean, it would have been a real crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that I mean, it is what it is, and but I find that really upsetting. The idea that you have this really great idea and you have a space that's there aren't a lot of spaces that can accommodate that kind of project, and then this happens, so it completely pulls the rug out from under both of you.
So just so you know, the audio is kind of muddled for me. I couldn't really hear you too well. Just a heads up.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just unfortunate.
Just suddenly became that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate of the timing, but I can't wait to see it when it actually happens.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's it, the way it was described to me. It's going to be the whole gallery is going to be transformed.
Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah. So, are there any further questions or comments?
I'm just letting people know that they can ask questions if they want to.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, because I love the idea of doing installation, and in some ways, my philosophy on art is more is more. you know, if you have an idea, you should do 50 of them, and then it'll take on a brand new meaning. Multiples,
That's right.
I think, is a really interesting way of dealing with a project. And I used to make multiples of. I would just make copies of the same exact thing over and over and over again. And I still think that's an interesting way of doing art. But nowadays, I have to think of the reality of well, if I'm gonna use all these materials, I then need to be able to cover my expenses so I can make something else later. So taking the same form and then changing it a little bit, each one of them becomes its own experience and its own project, and so then I can they can kind of all have their own life, and they can also kind of exist or work outside of the realm of the oh god, just check on the connection of the project as well, because there's nothing worse than like you have a piece and it's like it goes home with somebody. It's like, oh yeah, well it only made sense when it was amongst a group of other, 100 other things.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
would hate for someone to buy
Yeah, it's
it
going to
and be
work
like,
on
oh,
all
this
those
doesn't make
levels.
sense
Yeah.
in my house.
Yeah, and I think I cannot agree more about the one of the major things that I find interesting about art and art making and artists is that when you're dedicated to an idea, even for like just a brief time, but spending time with just one kind of basic concept and then just different iterations of that makes some wonderful things start to pop up. When you think that way. And thinking in series is something I really am in favor of, and that shows like because it's hard to you can't fake that. You can't fake that dedication to a series, right? So I find that really authentic.
So Shredded Hand asked me any plans to make sticker versions of these pictures, and actually I was thinking
Oh,
about doing that because there's a woman I make stickers with. Uh, Stick 'em Up Inc. In now she was in Jersey City. She was in Newark, then she was in Jersey City. Now she's in Elizabeth, and
mhm.
she makes most of my stickers, with the exception of the paper ones that I had a graffiti artist in Colorado make for me. Um, she does great work and she's local, but part of me felt like if I printed these out smaller than they already are, you lose a lot of quality. Although
Mhm.
because they're so painterly, I guess that it kind of messes with the printing process.
Right.
Although, yeah, I do like the idea of like having just the Homer character in the leap, with maybe
Right. Oh, yeah.
the
That makes
spot
a lot of
underneath
sense. Yeah.
him, like photoshopping the background out and having a series of those. The only thing is though the stickers are expensive. Like, so if you want to get your bang for your buck, you want to try and make as few designs as possible and as many multiples as possible. The more designs, the more costly it gets, or at least costly per sticker. So
Yeah. Right.
I wouldn't want to do a character that I thought wouldn't translate or people wouldn't get excited about, because I don't want to just make stickers for me, because a sticker is even more ephemeral, uh, than these paintings are and my normal work is.
Yeah. Very much so.
Um, Although I remember when I started doing the print stuff, I started making T-shirts. Cause like, oh, it'd be fun to make a T-shirt. I was in the process of making another Wolverine Super Mario, where it really looks like Super Mario's Wolverine, and it's a 9 by 12 image. And I stopped painting that painting just so I could scan the original, and I printed it at this online on this place called Printful, where my friend Tatiana does a lot of her individual merch stuff from that I really like. She's a painter. She's a she lives in Middletown, but she teaches in Rahway, and she's someone I worked with in the past. She's a great artist on top of it, and she makes a lot of her paintings into items like clothing items and prints and stuff, and the quality's really good too. But if I was going to do stickers, I would really like to work with Stick 'em Up Ink, because especially now with there being all this issue with local businesses, I want to try and support as many local artists and arts organizations that I can.
Hey, that's terrific. Yeah, I think especially my gosh, like that's so needed now. Like we all need to bond together. As art makers and art supporters.
Yeah, and I think like her main business is basically making stickers for graffiti artists.
I see.
So like she makes sticker slaps for people who are going to put them outside, and so uh, when the economy is down, those are the kinds of businesses that really get affected, because the people, their customers, just can't afford, you know, to buy stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So if I'm gonna do a sticker, I'm definitely gonna try and take one of the characters, just do the characters, because when she does the die cuts, it's so great just seeing the stuff that like takes its actual shape.
Yeah, and that's like coming back to the whole like, what do you work in different, like, what other media do you work in? You know, sticker is one of them for you. You know, it's become that.
Yeah, like
So I think that, yeah,
when I did my paternity leave show, the first show I did,
right, yeah.
she printed all the postcards,
Oh
and
well,
she doesn't normally do postcards, but she said she could do it. She gave me a great price, and um, those postcards still look as good as the day we handed them out. Like I still have some left. Um,
oh
and
right
then
on.
I bought later. I bought just on a whim because I got a coupon for Vistaprint, and those postcards aren't nearly as good. Um,
No,
and also like Vistaprint's gonna be fine. Like they're in Canada. They're gonna do just fine after this. They're a big business. They'll just kind of shift things around. But like someone who has a 3M printer or whatever Epson vinyl printer with like where she has to put the actual extra coating on it herself. Like that's the person I worry about.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, yeah, we're definitely in that where our environment is definitely framing how we think about what we do, especially like everybody, but artists, for sure, that we're rethinking the process of things. Like I remember when we were talking about mailing the show, like I would have loved the idea about you like putting all these in the mail. So there's something about like the form, like the image reflecting how it got here. It's like it's flying through the mail to get here, and it's sort of like this Ray Johnson style. Like it would have all those markings like on the back of it, like a postcard. So I'm like, this is really. I want to do a series of mail art now, kind of like Ray Johnson did, and just because of like of the current climate that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I remember when we were at Mason Gross, one of the printmaking teachers was like, "Yeah, aesthetic isn't as important as concept because you could really send something in the mail and have the aesthetic of it being handled by mail carriers is just as valid as the aesthetic that you would put into something with the mark making on your work." And I'm just like, that's brilliant. Yeah, I should be mailing stuff in the mail. And I made a lot of postcards over the years. Even like my Patreon um, gifts are usually postcards that I've either hand collaged or hand painted because I love the idea of getting stuff in the mail. Um, and to me, there's like
Yeah,
nothing better
right.
than
There's
that.
something compelling about that.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about the idea of like sending stuff that's going to be handled to people, especially like, my Patreon supporters are like friends and family. So like I would worry about right now sending them anything physical, you know.
Yeah, right.
But soon enough, I feel like at a certain point, um, especially if I could put a coating on something where I know you guys could just like spray it with alcohol and I don't have to worry about them contaminating anybody.
Oh yeah. No, I think it's more or less a safe way to get art. Yeah, but you're right. You probably should wipe it down before and
Oh, I
after
wipe
if
everything
you
down
can.
in my house. Like I spray all the mail with alcohol, like with isopropyl
Yeah.
alcohol and water. Um, and I've heard like people were telling me today, like, oh yeah, you really just have to leave it out because it doesn't really stand cardboard or paper that long. But I'm just like, well, I might as well just clean stuff just for the sake of being careful.
Yeah. Why not?
And like when
And like normally, I love the like when you in the past when you've mailed like I'm a proud Patreon supporter of Dave here, so definitely check him out. He said I love getting these like pieces, these artworks sent in the mail with, and it has this patina of mail carrier. I love that. I love getting that. It's like rough around the edges. There's markings. There's all these like things that are unintentional that just it shows the process of getting here, which I find really interesting, along with like the explicit artwork. So I like having that journey along with it.
yeah, and also with like the possibility that the U.S. Postal Service may go away in the next couple years. Uh,
Right.
I feel like I really want to try and use them to my advantage as much as possible. Like, and I feel like, people always complain about the post office, and I feel like the worst part about the post office is not the postal workers; it's like the other people in line with you. Like
Yeah.
people who are like or are stressed out because they want to try and get their thing in, or they're like they didn't put the right postage, or they don't have the zip code. And I'm not throwing shade at those people. I've been those people at some point in time in my life. And people are busy or whatever, but like it's kind of magical that we have this giant organization that like I can go to their website, I can arrange for them to come to my front door and pick up a box and send it to my friend in the next county, and I know it'll get there just fine. That's like amazing.
Yes. Oh yeah. Really? Yeah. It's quite remarkable.
Like the post office and libraries, like if you tried to start those things now, everyone would be like, "You are nuts. Why would we ever make that?"
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to start to see this evolution, and I mean, we're feeling it now, but this evolution of how to have that art exchange. Like having a physical space. The limitations of that, and like what are the benefits of that too. Like this, for example, like I love being able to do a stream from the physical location. It's very different than doing it from, I think, a studio or, like there's something else that this provides, like this kind of space that it's hard to mimic. And I want to, keep that going as much as I can.
Well, I think like part of the the way MGalleries works with the main gallery and the PNA gallery, you kind of run it more like artist space as community center. Like it's not just the gallery. You do the podcast, you do the poetry nights. We meet up on.
Oh yeah, I try to maximize the physical space as much as possible. So now I'm like rethinking, like how do I still use the physical space in concert with the internet? That's been what I've been meditating on for the past few weeks, and I'm coming up with a few ideas. Some are working, some are not. But I think more or less, we're going to come out of this with some level of understanding what would need to be done. And, going forward, like being able to continue.
Yeah, all of this is very strange. As I said, art in the time of Corona is very strange.
That's right.
But, that's why I wanted to do the live stream, and I'm probably going to edit it down a little bit.
Yeah, this is wonderful. We're and it's funny. It's perfect because my phone it seems like the limit is 2 hours, so this is perfect. Like I'm about I have 9% left, and it's about 10 minutes, and it's almost 8 o'clock, so it kind of worked out well. I wasn't sure how long my phone is going to last. So this is good to know without any kind of plug or anything.
Yeah, I think this worked out really well.
Yeah, also the connection here at the Arboretum is not wonderful. It's the phone there's really weak connection. So I'm really grateful that I was able to. Seems like it was streaming the whole time, So, but I'll check it out later.
Yeah, part of me also thinks that maybe even doing an installation in a space like this or outside, you could have the camera record almost like making a movie or a film.
Yeah.
Traveling through an installation, but I don't know. We'll talk about that off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would love to have some kind of a robot.
Oh, did I lose you again? Yeah. See, that's how people know it's real.
Oh, did I lose you, Dave?
Just for a second.
Oh, okay, good. But yeah, so. Yeah, I mean, this has been really great. I probably should wrap it up in a second because I don't know, my phone might die. But, yeah, really great. Thank you, Dave. This has really been a wonderful talk.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we should definitely do something else, too, throughout the month, before the month's out, some kind of event. So we'll talk about that in the near future.
Yeah, I think what we probably should also do is maybe take photos of all the works, and I could do it as a slideshow too, and we could talk about each one individually.
Yeah, me too. Oh yeah. I've been, yeah, absolutely been continually doing that. So on the social media, sites, I've been taking care of that
Because
as much as I can.
in theory, I should have images of all of them, but I have to just double check.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Look, Frank, it's my job to make the art. You're the curator. It's
That's
your
right.
job to curate.
I document. That is a major part of my day is document everything. So much documentation.
Yeah, because I wanted to make a zine to go with this.
Oh yeah, right.
Um, I wanted to make a zine, but I was like, I don't know if I'd be comfortable having you hand stuff out, or if it's even safe to have something like that.
Right.
So I might
At
turn
this
it
point,
into,
we just gotta,
yeah, I might make a
yeah, we got.
PDF and just email it to people. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, I think that probably is safer. Yeah, especially now because we're still in the middle of this, so we're not with like a little. There's a small light at the end of the tunnel, but that's about it for now. So we just got to deal with that, and then once we get our hands around this problem, then we'll go forward with it. But is there any other are there any other questions or comments on the stream before we wrap it up?
No, I think it's mostly just people thanking us for doing this.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for watching.
Philip J. Nolan, hold on. Oh, here's the problem. Everyone's gonna see how poorly I spell. There we go. I mean, the real problem is like on this laptop, everything is so far away. Just because I'm trying to also make sure I look presentable on camera, because normally I think I'm like this when I'm on this laptop all the time. All right, I think we probably should end it here. Also, because I think this.
Yeah, this is perfect. Like my phone's about to die. It's almost 8 o'clock. So again, thank you for everybody for watching, and thank you, Dave, for a really awesome show. And we'll be seeing you soon.
Sounds great.
All right, Dave. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
All right, thanks so much, Frank.
All right, bye.